Welcome to Scott Bryson Beyond the Service. Today I'm super excited to be interviewing the Sheriff of Cabarrus County. I've known this man since 1995, I believe, when he taught one of my rookie school classes, or several of my rookie school classes. I know he's a busy man, and I really appreciate his time. Sheriff, I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for coming on to the show. Appreciate your time.
Absolutely, Scott. It's always a joy, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So the sheriff and I, like I said, I just referenced a second ago, we met in 1995, which was many moons ago when I was going through North Carolina basic law enforcement training, and he was working for the State Bureau of Investigation, which we'll get to in a minute. But before we get into that, I just wanted the sheriff to kind of just introduce himself to you guys. And Sheriff, if you'll just kind of give like a little overview of like where you're from and where you grew up, playing sports and college and married life and children and all that stuff, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. As Scott said, I'm the sheriff here in Cabarrus County in Concord, North Carolina. I was elected in 2018, so I'm serving on my second term currently. But I'm native to North Carolina, born here, raised here. I grew up in a small rural county called Person County, and the county seat is Roxborough. And not a lot of people know where it is, but it was a great place to grow up. You know, a great foundation. Grew up in the Baptist church, one high school in the whole county. So that kind of sums it up sometimes, and it still pretty much exists that same way today. So I had a great childhood and loved sports and being outdoors and those types of things. And I've held those things near and dear to me as I've moved on. And I had the opportunity. I went to college, went to Elon University. At the time, it was Elon College. One of the things that I became very interested in early on, and it kind of led me to law enforcement, was I joined the ROTC program, the Army ROTC program, when I was in college. And when I graduated as a second lieutenant in the Military Police Corps with the United States Army Reserve. So at a very early age, I began, being shaped and headed in the direction that I felt called to go into. And so I was very fortunate, graduated. I held a couple of private sector jobs that really and truly were getting a little bit of life experience. All of them surrounded some aspect of investigations, law enforcement, those types of things. And then I got the call in 1987 to join the State Bureau of Investigation as a special agent, and enjoyed a very long career there that has been so rewarding to me, and to be able to work across this great state with so many wonderful agencies and people. I can't say enough about that part of my career. My career kind of has two phases, but that's kind of how I got where I am today. I'm married to my beautiful wife Tana. We've been together for over 35 years now. I have two adult daughters that live in North Carolina, one in Asheville and one in Greenville, North Carolina. I'm just a kind of simple guy. I like to do anything outdoors, and if it's around water, that makes it even better. So I enjoy getting out on the water and doing a little bit of fishing here and there, and just enjoying the simple things in life. And that's the way when people ask, I tell them, my private life outside of law enforcement is it's less than remarkable. I'm not an adrenaline junkie or anything like that, so it's pretty simplistic. But that's a little bit about me and my background and where I come from.
Well, that's good. I didn't know the part about the ROTC. That's really cool. Did you have a criminal justice degree, or were you a business major? What was your degree in?
No, my degree was in political science.
Okay.
At the time, Elon didn't offer a criminal justice degree, and so I pursued a political science with a concentration in state and local government, and it served me well. Mm-hmm. I think in a lot of ways it was a very broad education, and as I went into law enforcement, I kind of got that more criminal justice focused training and education.
Yeah, that's good. I went to App State and I have an education degree, and I thought about the criminal justice thing, but I don't know why I never switched. I think I was going to lose too many credits, but I kind of got the itch halfway through college to get into law enforcement as well. But I know a lot of people watching this are either young officers or maybe want to get into law enforcement. So the whole point of this podcast is just to try to, which we'll get into the weeds in a minute, try to help people, get their foot in the door, and then how to survive a career that's as good and rewarding as ours, but that can be traumatic too. It's kind of like a death by 1,000 paper cuts, And
Mm-hmm.
the military folks go down range and come back with PTSD because they've been shot up or blown up. And law enforcement's got the same type of stress, but in a different way, right? It's not necessarily the big. Well, can be big events, right? But shootings and whatnot. But it's kind of like the everyday thing that just wears guys down, which we'll get into in a minute. How you sustained a healthy marriage and work-life balance and all that good stuff. I just want to move into your early days in law enforcement. So you left the private sector, and then your first job in law enforcement, if I understand correctly, was with the SBI. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so can you tell the folks a little bit about the SBI and what that looked like and the academy, how long it was, and how you kind of got your foot in the door with that?
Absolutely. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation is just that. It's an investigative agency, and its main mission is to provide investigative support to local and federal law enforcement agencies as it's needed throughout North Carolina. And that's been the very long tradition of the State Bureau of Investigation. And so you're typically working with other agencies and other investigators, detectives, those types of things, and provide a really a wide array of support in a lot of different forms. So if an agency doesn't have a SWAT team, the SBI had a statewide SWAT team. If they don't have a bomb squad, they had a bomb squad, so on and so forth. And so it's there as that assisting agency. I had the good fortune of meeting a number of agents, ironically, some that were from my county, and some that I worked with in the private sector that had retired, and so that kind of formulated even me having a stronger interest in entering into that agency, and I was fortunate to be able to come on board in 1987, and it was highly competitive to get in, and I was able to squeeze my way in the door, so to speak, and realize very quickly I needed to work hard to prove myself and absorb everything I can. And I think that's the the message to anybody entering into law enforcement. Take that opportunity, and really work hard and let people know. I tell people all the time, my job as sheriff is to get them where they want to be in their career. And you got to let people know. You got to talk with people, discuss, investigate different areas, specialties, those types of things, and go after it. For those that might be, watching in other states, the State Bureau of Investigation is very similarly set up, just like the GBI in Georgia, FDLE in Florida, those types of areas, and it's primarily states that don't necessarily have a full state police, say like the state of Virginia, that has a state police that has a patrol division and investigative division and so on. In North Carolina, it's divided. You have the North Carolina Highway State Patrol that does that job of traffic enforcement and just dealing with the interstates and state highways and rural roads, while the State Bureau of Investigation is solely focused on investigative efforts.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you said that because when I was a young Secret Service agent stationed in Charlotte, I worked with a guy who was from Pennsylvania, I think, and he was always like he couldn't quite wrap his head around how we had a state highway patrol and I think he probably knew about the SBI, but he's like, why isn't it the state police? I'm like, dude, I don't know. It's just different. I
It,
don't know what to tell you. So you
it
brought
is.
up something. Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. It was set up. We're talking about the Highway Patrol, I think, was established in like 1926. The SBI came a little bit later in 1932. A number of states just saw some value in that separation of not having a state police and making sure the sheriffs and chiefs of police play an important role in state law enforcement as well. So again, other examples, TBI in our
Yeah.
our neighbor to the south, SLED, the state law enforcement division. We're all set up the same way, and it's just a way of doing business that's a little bit different in North Carolina. The State Highway Patrol under the governor, the State Bureau of Investigation under the Department of Justice. So just not one better than the other, but just different approaches.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I worked with three different guys. One had been GBI, one had been TBI, which I had never heard of really until I went to the Secret Service and met him. And of course, I know about SLED. So it's just different, and one's not better than the other. I don't think. I mean, I know I never did either. But funny tidbit, you may. I don't know if I ever told you this or not. But I want the audience to know, anybody watching this who knows the sheriff knows he's an extremely humble man. But working for the SBI is no joke, and it's hard to get that job. And then to have the career that he had is amazing. Because when I was trying to get into law enforcement in the 90s, mid 90s, I applied with multiple agencies, and one of which was the SBI, and I never heard back. I didn't get a response. So I know you're very humble, but to get your foot in the door and then to make it is quite remarkable. So I know you're very humble, but you had a very good career.
Absolutely, I enjoyed it. I had a lot of opportunities, and obviously working investigations throughout the state. And then I moved more into the special operations side, where we were doing specialized types of responses in support of local agencies, and it was something that was near and dear to my heart, having served for 13 years on the state SWAT team. And it just unfolded where I was able to move into management in those regards, and just a lot of opportunity and hard work in that organization is rewarded. I mean, I started out as a lowly special agent, doing some of the most basic investigations, and when my career ended, I was the deputy director of that agency, and very proud of that fact, and helping to move the agency forward through technology and a number of other ways that make the agency what it is today.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Quick question. I didn't even think about this until we started talking. When you mentioned the GBI, did the SBI have anything much to do with the whole Eric Rudolph thing back in the I think it was the 90s, mid 90s, after the not Oklahoma City but Atlanta? I know the GBI was up there with the FBI running around because that was so remote, Western North Carolina. Were you guys involved in that at all?
Yes, we were. We had agents on the ground up there as well, and you're right. I mean, it's that area is where Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina all meet.
Yeah.
And you literally can't tell sometimes which states you're standing in. So it was a great individual effort. I think the interesting thing about Eric Rudolph's case, after a massive manhunt, is that a local police officer simply doing his job and doing it well, and focusing and having an attention to detail, finds Eric Rudolph and identifies him, and and it's really, I think, a tribute to everybody that put in an effort up there, that there was still constantly folks looking out and trying to bring him to justice.
Yeah. Now that was my cousin Brody runs Snowbird Wilderness Outfitters. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's a Christian outdoor camp, or extreme outdoor camp up in Andrews, and so he was kind of keeping me abreast of everything that was going up there. It's like that was a lot of drama for a little one horse town.
Yes, absolutely. And being thrust into the limelight, and how are we going to manage this very rugged terrain and manpower intensive, and just so much area to cover that he could potentially be in. That was monumental. It was an impressive operation, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. So let's, if you don't mind, let's before we switch gears, I kind of wanted you to explain your career with the SBI, which you kind of just did a little bit, Cliff Note version there. But like with the Secret Service, we had phase one, phase two, phase three. I'm not sure if the SBI was set up like that or not. Like being a working agent, moving into supervision and things like that. But you might not want to tell the story, and if you don't, that's okay. It's no problem. But what I like to do sometimes on here is we're going to get deep and we're talking about some serious things, but then sometimes we just like to tell funny stories. Do you remember and or feel comfortable talking about an item that you may or may not have brought to my BLET class
Oh yes,
that we had to
yes,
open the windows for?
yeah, and that individual officer retired not too long ago, and the actual story came up at his
Oh,
retirement,
did it?
and absolutely, I was teaching a basically a narcotics recognition class, and as we did back then, we would bring in various examples of drugs so that individuals in this basic training could be able maybe to see them for the first time,
Yeah.
maybe not, but
Yeah.
we hope most of them were seeing these drugs, and be it cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana, so on and so forth. And we were doing this class and passing it around. As always, I kept a watchful eye because I was responsible for what I brought out of the secure storage. I had to make sure it went back in at the same everything. And
Yeah.
one of the students thought it would be funny to play a little bit of hide and seek
Oh boy.
with a pretty substantial amount of cocaine. When I discovered it, it did not go well at that point. I became very frustrated and used it as let's say I used it as a teaching point of how sometimes practical jokes can go a little too far,
Yeah.
and especially law enforcement. And no ill will was in it. It was, we're all young once, and that individual went on to have a very long, successful career, rising up into command staff level position. But he never forgot the lesson that was taught that day. And like I said, we had a good laugh and joked about what was the beginning of his career
Yeah.
and the mistake he made, but the valuable lesson he learned. So yeah, it's you really you look back, and there are times when things seem really serious, and you can laugh about them now and realize that there's a lot of teaching points and a lot of the things we do training wise,
Yeah.
and sometimes those are even come out of the mistakes that are made.
Sure.
And this was a good one, and it was amazing to see how many people in the class very quickly said, "It's not me," it's not me, and a lot of quick finger pointing. So
Yeah.
I'll keep his name
Yeah. No, I get it.
to myself,
I
but
get it.
he knows it well, and we often laugh and joke about it.
Oh yeah, we were on here the other day with my buddy Tyler talking about an op that they did with the Waynesville Police Department, and it was an undercover thing. And the guy was going, the young officer was the undercover guy, and he went into the house. It was a prostitute ring thing, and he gave the code word, but they were because it wasn't an officer safety issue. It was they took their time getting to the house to make it a little uncomfortable and awkward for him, and they of course, they wouldn't do anything, like I said, that would require officer safety issues, but they put him in a little bit of a bind for a minute or two, and they love laughing about that. So you have to, I think we know it because we've done it for so long. Law enforcement people have a dark sense of humor. Not that that was dark, but like I think it's a coping mechanism, and sometimes you do have to, you kind of flirt with danger, so to speak. You get right up to that line and do some practical jokes that maybe go a little too far, but then years later it's kind of fun to reminisce on. But yeah, thanks for sharing that, and I'm sure he appreciates you keeping his name out of it. But do you feel comfortable just kind of giving to everybody like an because I'm interested as well. Like you started off in field office X, and then like did you have to move around a bunch, or did you were you able to sort of hunker down in a specific region of the state, or?
Well, it's funny you talk about that specifically. My first duty assignment, I was living in the Greensboro, North Carolina area, completed my field training up there. And then at the time, the practice with the SBI was they decided where you went.
Okay.
And so I was contacted and told to go to a certain county. I got there and I said, wow, this is a lot like where I grew up. So, a little disappointed. I was young and ready to be, in a bigger place. But that was okay. And then I got called at the last minute and said, why don't you go check out Cabarrus County and see what you think there? Well, I'd never heard of Cabarrus County, but it was right outside of Charlotte, a growing town. It's grown tremendously over the years. And as soon as I got there, if you can piece together me growing up in a very, very small town, okay, no movie theater, no bowling alley, no mall, any of that. And as I pulled into Cabarrus County and Concord, the first thing I saw after getting off the interstate was a mall, a movie theater, a bowling alley, and a lot of other things. And I found the first payphone that I could find and said, I'll take Cabarrus County. Now, I've been fortunate, other than Raleigh, having to be in Raleigh when I was a deputy director, to spend the vast majority of my time, or all of my time, in Cabarrus County.
Oh, that's really good.
And the reason is when I moved into special operations, those were statewide positions. So I could literally live anywhere I needed to. And I did. There were a couple of times I tried to move, to be honest. And I think this is where, we make our plans, as the song goes, and God laughs at us. And I put in a request to move back home to Person County. And they said, well, Van, we can't use you in Person County. We've got somebody there, but we'll put you one county over. And I told the assistant director at the time, I said, well, that really doesn't help me much. I might as well stay where I am. And he said, well, there you go. You got your answer. I did that one other time. And again, it was moving closer to family. Same type of situation. And so I feel like God's had a hand in where I am, and been here in this county, for going on 38 years, and really enjoy it and see the growth here is tremendous. And so, that's what did. Now, others moved around because of opportunities. Being in what is referred to as the Southern Piedmont District, in and around the Charlotte area, it encompasses 9 counties, a tremendous amount of the state's population. So a lot of work to be done, great people to work with. I'm blessed with being able to have learned from some of what I consider some of the best investigators in the business. And so there was a reason for being able to stay here and then learn all that I did. Just be honest with you, by the sheer numbers of crime. I was seeing, 24 murders a year, and working those investigations where agents in other counties might see 1 or 2 a year. And so it increased my ability, I did crime scene for a while. I just really pieced together a lot of things that made me an overall, I feel like, good investigator. I won't say great, because I hold myself up against certain people, and that they were unbelievable. But it did give me a lot of opportunities. So when I went into the special operations side and got to go work in Eastern and Western North Carolina, I felt like I was bringing a lot to the table, and felt like that I was helping in a number of different ways. And so I got to meet so many wonderful chiefs and sheriffs and just investigators, like I said, all over the state. And, I pride myself on my, geography knowledge of the state of North Carolina. There's just not, I don't believe, any county that I haven't either driven through or set foot in at some time during my career.
That's really impressive. I should know the answer to this, but the Charlotte Mech, was that one of the 9 counties, or?
Yes, that was it. It was, and of course, seeing that county and city grow over the years was tremendous, and just the different crime trends and those types of things you see throughout the years, and trying to address those. And again, a lot of times, what was being seen across the state was being seen first in the larger areas. The Wake County, the Guilford counties, those types, and certainly Mecklenburg led that. And so whether it was investigative techniques or how do we address a crime problem? We were on the forefront of trying to do that
Yeah.
through a number of different ways.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. I'm sure you you had a wealth of experience with the homicides, and in particular. Can you talk briefly, try to explain to those that may not understand, and I might not fully understand, your role as an SBI agent as it pertains to like an officer-involved shooting? I know agencies have their own internal affairs. Some may not if they're smaller. Could you just walk the audience through kind of what that looks like as coming in, and you're a fellow law enforcement officer, but then you're kind of also required to do the IA type stuff?
Yes, and the State Bureau of Investigation is tasked with conducting law enforcement officer involved shootings, and so it is difficult. You may one day be out there working and doing a drug operation or whatever the case may be, and then another day you're investigating how a law enforcement involved or officer involved shooting transpired, and so it's a difficult task. I've been on a number of different ends. I've been involved in shootings where the SBI was investigating it. I've investigated shootings, and as a sheriff, I've had officer involved shootings at my agency, and had to call the SBI in to do it. But the purpose behind it is that it's an independent law enforcement agency that's looking at it. That's really obligation is to report to the district attorney what they find in that investigation. So they're going to come in. They're not assuming guilt or innocence. They're just doing a factual investigation and piecing that incident back together. It's a lot different now, with the onset of body cam and so many of these incidents being caught on video. They're self-explanatory, but there's still a significant amount of investigative effort that goes into the actions of the officer, the actions of the suspect. Was deadly force justified in this situation? And again, the district attorney has the final say so in that, but the facts are presented to them directly, not to me as an agency head, but to them. Now they're wonderful of keeping me abreast of where their investigation's headed, those types of things, but we don't participate in the investigation. They process the scene, they secure the weapons for ballistic testing, all of those types of things, and then they generate that report that can then, along with all the video, all the records, everything down to what the officer was wearing, as well as the suspect at the time of the shooting, number of rounds that were fired, number of rounds that were even left over, what weapons were used. So it's an all encompassing investigation. And I think it serves the public well, that an independent agency is looking at it. So, and they bring agents, which is typical, from outside the area. Anytime, let's say, that if I was assigned as the resident agent of Cabarrus County, which I was, if there was an officer involved shooting, I would not participate in that investigation
Okay.
as an. I might be sent to Mecklenburg. I might be sent to Gaston, Union, Cleveland, somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
to do an officer involved shooting, and that's purposeful
Yep.
because obviously build bonds and relationships, and again it removes that bias that
Yeah.
you may naturally have because you know these people,
Mm-hmm.
and you know what they're made of, so to speak. So
Yeah.
it avoids that whole prejudgment
Mm-hmm.
type of situation. So I think it's a system that works incredibly well, and really provides true insight as to what happened in those incidents.
Yeah. I didn't think about that, but that's a good point because especially if you have a good rapport with what if it's one of your buddies or just it's just an it doesn't matter if it's a buddy or not. You just probably have a rapport with the guy, so that makes a lot of sense to me. Um, Without using names, I would never want to, even though it's in the past, would want to disparage any agency or person. Is there anything, and hopefully the answer is no, but did you ever investigate or were you ever part of an investigation where like there might have been some corrupt agency involved or corrupt office. You know what I mean? Like whether it was Vice or whatever. I know you guys were very busy doing all kinds of things. I just, again, without getting in the weeds, could you? Did that ever happen? Did you ever find yourself going, "Oh my gosh, what the heck"?
Um, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did a number of investigations where, and again, you're assigned based on kind of your background. I investigated an officer that was removing drug evidence, manufacturing to some degree false cases against individuals, but also removing cash, those types of things. So, having unfortunately to go and do that, you do encounter, sometimes you're not always welcome because they have relationships and as you interview other officers. But I would say by and large, as you investigate and you're able to establish that some misconduct occurred, and not only that, it jeopardized the agency's reputation, the other officers' reputation. They understand that is a necessary evil. We have to police each other. We have to make sure we are accountable and you know performing to that higher standard that we're all held to. So it was not ever pleasant to do it, but you knew you had a job to do, and it was a very important job. Important to make sure that innocent people don't go to jail or prison. And so we're involved in cases where that was the case. Sometimes not in the initial phase. It might be in executing a search warrant at an agency. I was involved in one where we executed a search warrant to go in and search a vice narcotics office, arresting high officials in an agency. So unpleasant as it was, it's a necessity, and you felt like you were doing a tremendous service to the law enforcement profession.
Well, I hated to even ask that question because I'm sure. I mean, I don't know who's watching these things, and there could be some anti-police person watching it. I kind of doubt it, but maybe. But the point I guess I'm trying to make is police officers are human beings too, and there are some bad ones because people by nature are bad. The Bible says no one is good, not even one. So because you're a cop doesn't necessarily mean you're a saint. The point I'm trying to make is the vast majority of law enforcement people are good, right? There are bad teachers, there are bad doctors, there are bad lawyers, whatever. Just I know we've kind of moved past some of that George Floyd era, where defund the police and all that good stuff. But I just wondered if you could just kind of follow that up because, like I said, it was kind of a lead up question. I hated to even ask it because I know it exists. But could you just speak to the general public about how, yes, that does happen from time to time, but the vast majority of my brothers and sisters are really good cops.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the I never worked a law enforcement involved officer involved shooting uh, that was anything other than legitimate. That the cause was there to use deadly force. That's me individually, personally. From a standpoint, when I was in the State Bureau of Investigation, that percentage was very very small, and a lot of times it involved off duty situations where emotions ran high, family involvement, those types of things that were outside the scope of the duties, but nonetheless, they were still officers. And the men and women that get up and do this job every day are remarkable, and the vast percentage of them do it with a high degree of integrity. There are those, like you said, that can't get out of their own way. They make decisions that, some that can be dealt with and used as, a correction point with disciplinary action. And then there's some lines that are crossed that you just can't come back from. And, as a law enforcement leader and the head of my agency, I take that very seriously. And because if you don't, you lose all credibility. And that's all I've got. At the end of the day, all of us it's our credibility that makes us who we are. And so while that's difficult to do, Fortunately, it's not something you have to do very often, and I think there's a big difference whether we're talking about just general job performance. Maybe this isn't the line of work for you, and you're not doing it well, versus conduct, versus blatant policy violations, procedure violations, law violations, those types of things. Those incidents are few and far between, and I can't say enough, not only about my agency, but so many agencies I work with, and just the incredible professionalism and in dealing with so much especially over the past 4 or 5 years. Just the social issues. You mentioned George Floyd. I came into office in 2018, and in 2019, a thing came along called COVID. Uh, and there wasn't a manual sitting on the shelf that told me how to run a sheriff's office when you have a pandemic. But I was so proud of the men and women that just said, "No, I'm going to get up and come to work every day. We'll shift gears. We'll do it a little differently. But they were out there, even at what at the time, was being hyped as a highly, dangerous situation. That they met it head on, and they're better for it today. We're all better for it. We've learned a lot of lessons. We know how to handle things better, and as well as the social issues and other events outside our community that we can't control. That somebody does something, but it still has impact on the profession. And I think how we respond to that, and talk about what we do and how we do it in our community, makes a big difference in keeping our, one of the, and not to get off, but one of the things I'm most proud of my community is during the post George Floyd, where a number of riots and demonstrations that resulted in violence and property destruction were occurring. Here in our community, we had 13 different types of protests, prayer walks, community meetings, those types of things. And there was absolutely zero damage done, no officers hurt, no citizens hurt. It was peaceful. We communicated. We talked about ground rules, and early on, we're in this together and making sure that we knew each other well before a crisis event. That I knew the leaders of community groups, and we had sat down and talked before something like that happened. And then you're able to develop relationships where there's trust and in those types of things. And I've been fortunate over the last 6 years that when we've had officer involved shootings or situations, a lot of those groups that come out representing members of the community, we were able to sit down and talk, and they felt very good about the way it was being handled and what led up to the situation, and unfortunately what led up to the officer involved shooting. So I really think it speaks to the community we have here, but what law enforcement can do moving forward, and lessons learned from that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And I think it also starts at the top. The sheriff or the chief of police and the DA's office and the mayor or the city council or whatever. A lot of these problems that were happening, the mayor or whomever wouldn't allow the police to really kind of do their job. So I think, from what I've witnessed in your county over at Cabarrus County, is you've got the trifecta. You've got the chief and yourself, the chiefs of police and yourself, and the DA and the mayor, and everybody just seems to be in lockstep. It kind of gets back to the old Rudy Giuliani broken windows policing. It's like people who haven't lived a life in law enforcement sometimes don't understand. And trust me, I'm a big spirit of the law guy too. I mean, there's the letter of the law, which I understand there's a place for that, but I'm kind of a spirit of the law guy sometimes as I've gotten older. But there's something to be said for no nonsense, because it sets the tone moving forward. So it's like, if you're going to let this little stuff slide, then what happens when you have something major? It's like there has to be consequences, and it's a fine line. And it's, I don't envy anybody in those positions, but I think that, you and the other leaders have done and are doing a phenomenal job. And I'm glad that I know you. And this interview is not wrapping up just quite yet. We're getting ready to get into the sheriff's department stuff. But I just want to take a second and just thank you publicly for your leadership and just your heart, and not only coming on my little podcast and speaking to me, but I just wanted to thank you publicly for everything you do for Cabarrus County.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, Scott. It means a lot to me, and being in law enforcement is a passion, and it's something because there's so many ups and downs. You have to have a passion for this job, like so many other jobs. You just really do, and if you work hard and have good results, it feeds that passion, and you want to do more.
Yeah, yeah. I think law enforcement, like being a preacher or a teacher, it's a calling, right? If you're not called into it or you don't have a passion for it, you probably shouldn't do it because it's not for everybody. I used to make this joke with my wife about this guy that lived next door to us in Virginia, engineer, super smart, great guy. I'm like, Dave is an awesome guy, but Dave does not need to take a gun to work. I could never do his job and he can't do mine. And that's what makes the world go around, and that's okay.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I've got so many friends outside of law enforcement, and they tell me I couldn't do your job. And I look at them and say the same thing. I'm not sure I could do yours. We're all wired a little bit
Yeah,
differently, and but then there's also a lot of you know common traits that we possess,
yeah,
and I think the most important common trait that we all possess in law enforcement, and those that stay in it a long time, is that we put service above self,
yeah,
and you have to. It's a lot of times you're doing something you absolutely don't want to do. It's not the situation you wanted to find yourself in, but it's something that you have to do,
yeah,
and it's for the betterment of the community, for upholding the law and keeping order, and not letting things get so out of hand that we saw in so many communities just a few years back where order wasn't maintained. One of the things I told my folks, we had a meeting and when this was going on all over the country, and I said, we're not going to have one patrol car burned in our community. We're not going to do it. We're going to stay. We're going to do what we've got to do
yeah,
in order to maintain, order and protect the property of people that have worked so hard to build up what they
yeah,
have. And and we did that, and we did it as a group.
yeah,
We did it as all agencies coming together. It wasn't Van Shaw. It was all of us. As you said, one of the great things of living and working here is we all pull in the same direction. It's a conservative community, and we believe in the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, and wanting to make sure our citizens are safe, and that they feel that, and also that any question, complaint, or anything is answered.
yeah,
It's addressed, it's answered, and sometimes it's just a matter of explaining a situation and working with folks to reach better understandings because they simply don't understand,
yeah,
why a situation unfolded the way it did.
yeah. Well, I think it's a perfect segue into getting into your current career as a sheriff. Um, before we kind of totally switch, I just want to get your perspective because I have some ideas. I don't know if I'm right, but how in the world do you think it gets to the point where it's okay to burn a police car or a precinct? I mean, that didn't happen in your neck of the woods, and I know why it didn't. It's called good leadership. But how does that happen, Sheriff? Because I mean, when I was watching it, I was like, and maybe I would have ended up in jail myself, as I don't know, but like I don't have it in my DNA to retreat and to surrender a whole precinct. I don't get that. How does that
Well,
happen?
Scott, I think sometimes there's in situations, especially involving social issues and those types of things, where you get into this group think. What can we do to minimize this? What can we do, to placate this group or this individual, but not setting boundaries? As I said, when we had marches and everything, we met with folks and said, this is what's going to happen, but this is what is not going to be tolerated.
Yeah,
you're doing this protest from 2 to 4 p.m. It's going to end at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to make sure it ends at 4 p.m. So I think part of it is setting that stage and setting those expectations, and then talking with individuals that are in charge and saying, the first person we're coming for is you.
Mm-hmm.
You're the organizer of this event.
Mm-hmm.
So it places a burden on their back to maintain their people.
Yeah.
And, it's that, because what you have, if you don't, you get that mob mentality
Yes.
where somebody feels like they can do something because they have a little bit of cover
Mm-hmm.
because there's 300 people out here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw a rock, or I'm going to break a car window because I'm protected by these people that are around me, and I probably won't be seen.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have done it if they were out there by themselves
Mm-hmm.
or out there with one or two people. And you have to work to keep that under control.
Yeah.
And I think some leaders mistakenly said, well, let's just let them have that area. Let's let them let's let them have their time in that area. And those areas became sacrificial lambs in certain communities. Even police
Yeah.
stations were given away.
Mm-hmm.
Courthouses were given away.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are you saying to the people? I mean, are they going to up the ante? And now it's a larger building, or it's something else, or it's a residential neighborhood, as we saw on TV.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that.
Mm-mm.
And I tell everybody I hire, I said, one of the things I want you to do is treat somebody the way you would want to be treated if you found yourself in the same situation,
Mm-hmm.
and walk in their shoes and try and do that. And then the follow up statement I have is, and when they will not let you do that, we do our job unapologetically.
Yes.
And I think our officers know that. I
Yeah.
think they know they have support.
Yeah.
And during that time, a lot of officers saw very quickly that they didn't have the support
Mm-hmm.
of their government leaders. They didn't have trust in who was making decisions for them. One of the great things about being a sheriff is you're an elected official.
Mm-hmm.
I work for the citizens of this county. I don't work for anybody else but them, and they give me my report card every 4 years. And so my obligation is not to another elected official; is to the people of this county.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most sheriffs operate that
Yeah.
way. And when one agency, because of some political factors, may say, "Well, they're not letting us do that," that's when the sheriff should step in and say, "Well, I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
I have the jurisdiction. I have the authority. I'm going to protect this community."
Mm-hmm.
And when you see that happen, is when you see order get restored, and lessons learned. And I'm just forever thankful we were able to avoid that,
Mm-hmm.
and not fall into that trap.
Well, I think that's right. I think I say this all the time. And it probably gets annoying, but there's a huge difference between leadership and management. I manage my finances. I want to lead people, and I think you could see that You could see pretty clearly in 2020, especially who the leaders were and who were the managers. And we'll get off this topic, but was it Seattle or somewhere where they had the autonomous zone downtown? I mean, that got out of
Yeah,
control quick.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned the broken windows theory, and it's simple. Is if you ignore the low level crimes of breaking a window, stealing a bicycle, shoplifting, those types of things, it's only going to get worse. You have to do order maintenance.
Yes.
You have to make those vehicle stops. You have to go to those calls involving vandalism, because if you don't, it will only bring about larger problems. And I think in some law enforcement agencies across the country, we went away from that. Okay. And we went away from that mandate of public order maintenance. And that's what citizens want. They want to go to the store and buy their groceries without having to be concerned about being a victim of a crime,
Yep.
whether that's a low level crime or not.
Yep.
And when you don't police those crimes, you're creating that environment.
Well, and it's only gotten worse over time, because now with the sex trafficking and the kidnapping of young girls and women, not just little ones, but 20-year-old girl, right? I mean, you should be
Right.
able to go to Target and shop in peace, or go to Home Goods or whatever, without some weirdo trying to grab you, and it starts. I mean, that doesn't happen overnight. You know, that's cyclical. That's a cause and effect, right? And I know some of the guys that I'm friends with that work for you have told me some stories that, you know, they'll arrest these tough dudes that come out of Charlotte. When they find out they're in Cabarrus County, they start crying because they know they're not in Mecklenburg County. I think it's great.
Yeah, exactly. Because, like I said, our whole team here is doing what's right. I mean, from prosecution of crimes to judges making good decisions based on the law, making sure those individuals that need to be in jail are in jail because they're not going to show up for court or they're a threat to public safety. And that's really why you put somebody in jail in a pretrial status,
Yeah.
and then make sure that the jail or detention center is run in a matter of that we control it. It's not run by the inmates. And so when you hold people accountable and they know, oh my goodness, I'm going to this county. I didn't realize I was in this county. And you're not going to get out. You're not going to get an ankle bracelet. You're going to get a bond. You're going to be there, whether you end up being bonded out or your day in court. It puts a different spin on it, and they begin to recognize those boundaries, and that's why we've been able to maintain a crime index that's one of the lowest in the states. Cabarrus County is a great place to live. It's a safe place to live,
Yeah.
and comparatively by other counties our size, we're one of the safest in the state, and we're very proud of that.
Yeah.
And but we work hard.
Yeah.
We target gun violence. We go after folks that we need to go after. So I'm proud of what we do here.
Well, I know the people that work for you certainly love you, and I've never heard one bad thing. So that's good because there's always onesies and twosies, but I've literally never heard anything negative about Van Shaw. So that you should be very proud of that. So speaking of the sheriff's department, let's talk for a minute about how, because we're kind of getting close to an hour. We'll wrap it up here in a minute, but do you want to just kind of walk us through what that was like running for public office and then getting it and then getting reelected, and how that might be a little bit different than what you did in your prior life?
Yeah, I mean, my career goals were never to be a sheriff.
Yeah.
I'll just tell you, I got a phone call and was given an opportunity to come to Cabarrus County Sheriff's Office to head up the Criminal Investigative Division, and my almost immediate response was, "Great, I'm getting back to what I loved," and I came here the very same. I retired, took 1 week off, and I was back at work. So some people call it crazy, but I loved it. And so what transpired is the sheriff, that the sitting sheriff at the time, it was coming up for his retirement, and he and I had known each other for 30 years. And he talked to me one day and said, "Van, you ought to consider running for sheriff." And I'd never done that, never thought about that. So after a lot of praying, of course, running it by my wife and making sure that she's on board because that support group is so critical. I filed to run and immediately found myself in a primary against four other opponents. And so I'm thrust into a political environment that I've never thought I would be in. And then I simply told myself, just be you,
Yeah.
stand on your own accomplishments, speak your truth. Don't try to be anything you aren't, and run, take the high road, run against it where others weren't. And I was very successful. I got over 60% of the vote in the primary with five candidates running. And then again, won the general election later that fall. And then the reality set in. It's how are you going to do this? And fortunately, here in North Carolina, through the North Carolina Sheriff's Association, they run a Sheriff's Leadership Institute. 1 week after you get elected, you're sitting in a classroom learning everything about being a sheriff, the responsibilities, the legal aspects, and everything else. And it's a lot. And it's a learning. I think the entire time you're in office, you're learning. You encounter, just the other day, I signed a deed for a house that we had to sell at a tax auction. I mean, there's things you just don't I negotiate food contracts. I negotiate communications contracts. And so there's a lot other than just pure law enforcement that a sheriff does,
Yeah.
but it's fantastic. I love it. I do it. I like to say I do it because I want to, not because I have to. And but the lives you can affect and how you can lift up a community and be involved in a lot of different things that are just not law enforcement. And I sit on the mental health advisory board. I sit on a foundation where we give grants. I get to participate. I'm in the middle of our community needs assessment process right now. I sat on a task force. What do we need in Cabarrus County? What is priority? Whether that's housing, food, education, whatever the case may be. And so it gives me a different perspective when I do my job.
Well, that's all good stuff, and I appreciate you saying all that, and again, appreciate your time. We are kind of coming up here on an hour, which is not the end of the world, but we'll kind of start wrapping it up here in a minute. But before I let you go, I do want to touch on support network, what that looks like for a career in law enforcement, whether you've been on the job 5 years or 25 years. How in the world do you sustain that work-life balance? For me, it's been my wife and my kids have been nothing but supportive. I could have not have done the job I did without a supportive spouse, and I'm sure that's the same for you. And then also, if you could talk about your support network, and then you're a Christian as well as I am. Not everybody watching this is, and that's okay. But I just want people to understand, like, how in the world do you survive a law enforcement career? You have to have a network of support other than just yourself, or you won't make it.
Absolutely. I mean, family is the most critical part of that. If they're not behind you, it's going to be a tough career.
Yeah.
If they're not willing to understand the challenges that there are going to be birthday parties you can't make, there are going to be events that you miss, holidays that you can't be there, but if they understand that what you're doing is important and they're there to love on you and support you, it makes all the difference in the world. I'm a big believer in having friends outside of law enforcement. I have dear friends within law enforcement.
Yeah.
I mean, lifelong friends. And as a matter of fact, I have three very close friends, and we get together once a year and call ourselves the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. We just have a great time. We tell the same old war stories. It's nothing really changes, but that camaraderie is there, and that's a big factor. But having that outside, I mean, in talking with new folks, I say, look, in doing what's right, make sure you're doing it not only by policy and procedure, that's easy, but do it by your own personal ethics, morals, and religious beliefs, whatever those may be.
Yeah.
Let yourself be your guiding star. Don't compromise your own personal integrities and your own personal beliefs. You don't have to. You really don't. And you got to have priorities.
Yeah.
My priorities are God, family, and work. Okay. And they always come in that order. And I believe in that. And I believe that, God has spoken to me a number of times in a number of ways to direct me in my path and my career where I should be. And be slow to respond. You're going to get frustrated. You're gonna want to fire that email off or say something, and sometimes taking a deep breath, whether that slow to respond is 5 minutes or 5 days. It allows you not to be caught up in the moment. But I encourage everybody, have a hobby, do something, find something that can be an outlet for you that you just really enjoy doing, and can relieve some of that stress that naturally comes along. I'm a big believer in wellness. We have one here at the agency. We have a wellness program with embedded clinicians that work alongside our officers to talk with them and be there for them and have appointments for them. And I think wellness is a tremendously important topic in law enforcement today. You mentioned it at the very beginning. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of different ways that law enforcement officers deal with that stress, and we need to make sure we're providing healthy ways for them to deal with that.
Yeah.
and to prevent tragic outcomes and career-ending decisions. So I think we've got to move officer wellness to the forefront of law enforcement. It's just something we have to do.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. One of the things that my wife has taught me, I'm a slow learner, but one of the things that she's taught me, and it's really, it took a while to catch on, but I'm getting a handle on it finally. She's like, you need to respond, not react. And to your point, it's like, don't respond right away. She just says it a little bit differently. She's like, learn to respond, not react. So you don't have to fire off that nasty email 10 seconds after you get it. Maybe you sleep on it. Maybe it takes a week or something, like you said. And that's definitely helped me as I've matured, not only in age, but hopefully in wisdom as well. One thing I did want to touch on real quickly, very quickly before we wrap it up, because I know some of the people that do this job for you, the school resource officers. I know you take that very seriously, and we don't have to get into the weeds and the dark stuff, but that's a problem. Unfortunately, evil. This is a good versus evil type of world we're living in, and could you just talk about that for a second, about how serious you take that set of circumstances, because a lot of agencies tend to, that's a place where people get put out to pasture at the end of their career, and I know you don't take it that way.
No, absolutely not. I think we ought to be putting our very best people in our schools. That the school resource officer role was so important. Absolutely, it's there to prevent evil things from happening to our children when they're in school. But it also goes beyond that. It's the interaction. It's building bonds. It's being around the children in school and knowing that there's somebody that they can count on. There's somebody that they can come to, and that person is there. They're going to protect them. They're willing to die trying. And so that reason, with that heavy of a responsibility, you need to have your best people in there, and I've been able to do that. I've been able to find folks that have a calling to be in school, that are SWAT operators, former detectives, those types of things, but they have that calling, and not use it as an area where somebody gets put out to pasture, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
That does no good. It doesn't do any good as a frontline defense, and it doesn't do good as are they motivated to do the job that you really need them to do. And I think it's critical to have those officers in the school. And in so many examples across the country, those officers have stopped traumatic things from happening. I mean, it's just catastrophic things that happen. So day in and day out, they need to be tactically sound, but they also need to know how to partner with the school administration,
Mm-hmm.
as well as be there as a mentor and a confidant for the kids. And it, to me, in this community, our school resource officers are looked up to, and are just amazing folks. And nobody would want them to go away in any shape or form. So I feel I have a responsibility to put the very best people out there.
Well, I know that I'm friends with some people that work for you, and I know they appreciate the fact that you take it very seriously. Unfortunately, some departments don't, or maybe they can't. They don't have the resources, but
Right.
you do, and you've made that very clear. And I just wanted to let you know, from an outsider's perspective, my kids are grown now, but if I had kids in school, I would feel very comfortable with them going to one of your schools, based on the people that I know that work for you. And I just wanted to kind of, I guess, thank you for that, because it's a shame that that's a world we live in, but it's the world we live in, and it is what it is. So
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. And it's such a, in this day and time, and it is a shame. In this day and time, it's a necessity, and it's something. And until we can fix so many other issues and social issues out there, we're going to need to continue to do it. And we've got to put the resources there for those communities that don't have the luxury of, like Cabarrus County, where we have a school resource officer in every school.
mm-hmm.
They need to strive to do that. They need to prioritize to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's made a world of difference here, I feel like. And I think it's just so impactful in the lives of those children. and in the peace of mind of the parents when they drop their little ones off every day, seeing that school resource officer out front, greeting them, looking around, being aware, being diligent. That it's definitely a source of comfort for them.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Sheriff, it's always good to see you. I know we don't get to talk as much as we could maybe, but we're both busy men doing different things. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to make a little time for me and this little podcast that I started a couple months ago. Like we were talking off camera, I feel a little weird doing it. Sometimes it feels weird. I was a public servant for a long time, and to be on camera talking about stuff feels a little awkward for me, but I don't know. I just feel like that's the chapter of my life I'm in right now, and I just appreciate people like you taking the time to entertain me.
Well, and Scott, I want to thank you. I mean, I think you're doing a great job. I think sometimes, shows like what you're doing cut through all the biased and, those types of things. And it gives an opportunity to really talk straight up about what the reality is and not what, some person's individual perspective is. It's, look, this is it. We're having a conversation about how things are. And I know you've done it from a number of different angles. And I just appreciate you and what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that. We, like we say on here, we call balls and strikes, and don't have all the answers for sure, but we don't sugarcoat it, and we don't play politics. We're just calling, 2 + 2 will never be 5, and that's our approach.
Absolutely. You're right. Absolutely. Just a friend of mine uses a term all the time, and he says truth and time goes hand in hand. And truth will always come out. It's just, I think shows like yours help us get to it quicker and talk about issues that we're all concerned about and get straight answers for it. And as you said, you call the balls and the strikes as you see them, and that's really what needs to be done. So thank you for your efforts.
I appreciate you saying that, Sheriff. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah.